Well, hey there, and thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a long time, so we appreciate you coming back.
Welcome back to Light a Fire Studio. Thanks for tuning in to part 3 of our 3-part series on a beginner's guide to making sculpture.
Let's just do a quick recap. In part 1, we learned about inspiration. How do you find it? How to sketch out your ideas, and how to make a maquette or a model, a smaller scale version of what you ultimately want to make. Then in part 2, we explored implementation and fabrication, how to choose your material, what works best for your ideas, and then how to put it all together. And now on for part 3, finishing and knowing when to quit. What do you want your finished sculpture to look like? What surface treatments will you use? And ultimately, how will you know when it's finished?
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'd like to showcase 4 artists who I think exemplify a finished work of art.
Maya Lin. The zeitgeist of memorializing the Vietnam War came in the form of a sculpture by a young student from Yale. Lin's commemoration of this tragedy in American history launched her to the spotlight, where fine and public art crash, for better or for worse. Though it still remains one of her most iconic works, her career spans decades, and her dedication to craft makes her a highly polished and refined visual artist. Her most critical and lasting pieces expose our relationship to the land and the human connection to history, time, and memory. One artist who has informed and inspired everything I make is Richard Serra. His monumental steel and industrially inspired sculptures unveil the core of our current age and existence. Most notable are his ribbons of incredible steel. They're laid about with the ease of a giant, whose fixation on space and balance creates how we perceive our own place in the universe. From early beginnings, Serra knew he needed to make the space conform to the will of his materials. Monolithic in scale, his sculptures perfectly define humanity's point in history. His works appear in space as if they always were and forever will be. Next up, Louise Nevelson. She was one of America's most important artists, rising to prominence with sculpted wood assemblages that surpassed space and changed audiences' conceptualization of art. She was a master of materials and compositions, making her one of the leading sculptors of the 20th century. She was also a huge celebrity in her time in the art world. Her iconic personality and style made her a larger-than-life persona with a loving, charismatic presence. Her work is displayed and curated in public and private collections the world over. Finally, Luis Jimenez. He found his voice as an apprentice in his father's neon sign studio, where he was exposed to modern materials. He became a champion of fiberglass art, sculpting works inspired by the everyday lives of Latin Americans, the Southwest, and other larger-than-life creatures and characters. His work often showcased marginalized corners of society, and he was always striving to go bigger and bolder with each new work. His personal style showcases the possibilities of when an artist dedicates themselves to the refinement of their craft.
When we're talking about finishing a surface, it's also important to talk about the tools we use to do that. And I find in my toolbox, one of the best tools you can have around if you don't already. I imagine most of you do, but if you're just starting out, a grinder is the most universal tool I probably use on every project I use in the shop, beyond like a screwdriver or something like that, or a hammer. The grinder has so many uses, and in that regard, we'll also talk about abrasives just for a minute. So I'm working on carbon steel, and there's lots of ways of finishing carbon steel, but most often are the following. When you're doing those first grinds and you're just trying to get off as much metal as possible, or let's say you had some overhangs or you had a chunk sticking out, the best thing you can use is just a hard grinding disc. They come in lots of different varieties, sizes, and they have many uses. I've even used these on wood before. The second most common disc I use in the shop is a flat disc. And again, they come in many different varieties, sizes, shapes. Some you put on with your chuck wheel, and others screw right onto your grinder. These are a little more expensive and they tend to last a little bit longer. And then you all the way down to the $1.50 from Harbor Freight. They don't last as long, but they work just as well. And they come in many different grits, just like sandpaper. Let's say that you had a bunch of rust or mill scale. Mill scale's that discoloration that comes out straight from the foundry or factory, and if you're doing any kind of TIG welding or critical welding, you want to remove mill scale, you want to remove any rust, and a really great way to do that is with a wire disc. And again, it just screws right onto your grinder, right on there, you're ready to go. But they also come in many different sizes and varieties as well. Stiffness, you have braided wires, you have all kinds of different stainless, carbon, stuff made for aluminum or exotic metals like titanium. You can use them to clean up your welds. You can even use these on wood to create really cool textures. It brings out the grain in wood really beautifully. Speaking about wood, there are a variety of different discs for that as well. This one's for taking out large areas of wood where you need to create a void or make a shape, or you just want to get a lot of surface off. You would never want to use this on metal. This is specifically designed for wood or other soft materials, styrofoam.
Here's a quick example of what you can do with a wire wheel on wood. See how nicely it just brings out the wood grain? Here's some other examples as well. I'll try to include some links to some of the tools that I use in a different variety of purposes. You can even use grinding discs on stone, like this marble here.
You can find these at like any big box hardware store, and probably your local small mom and pop hardware store is going to have a good variety. But again, you want to get rid of something fast and loose and quick, this is going to be your guy. And you don't want to be too aggressive, because we don't want to grind into these side panels and punch a hole, because then we'll have to clean all that up again. But once you finally got it down and you've gotten that texture to a point that you're happy with, then you're going to want to come back in there with your flat disc. And it just depends on how much you need to take off. Like a 120 is a pretty good one, a 240. If you want to be real gentle, use a 240. Or if you want to really take some stuff off, use a 60. And I think I was somewhere in between here. It's probably a 120. And that's how I was able to get this nice, clean, sharp surface. I still got a lot to take off here. And we'll step outside here in a minute and do that. But you can see how nice and smooth this is already starting to look. And that's courtesy of the flat discs.
Now on for some quick grinding. And don't forget your PPE, folks. Hearing, eyes. And here I'm wearing an N95, and I should probably be wearing a respirator, but hey, it keeps some of the junk out of my lungs. Just showing you some of the grinding discs and how they work. You want to keep moving in a steady, gentle pattern. You don't want to overdo any one area and end up grinding right through. That would lead to more welding. Now we're getting on to the 120. You want to start with your lowest, heaviest grit first, like a 80 or 60. Then move up to your 120, and if you're liking how that's coming out, go on up to a 240 or a 220. Now that I've got most of that off, I'm just showing you here, I want to start to get this ready for whatever surface. The best tool to do that, and like I said, to get the mill scale off, is going to be your wire wheel. Be careful with these. The wires tend to come out over time and they can fly off and hit people around you or even yourself. And just be really careful with wire wheels. And within a few hours of grinding and sanding and grinding and wire wheeling, it's all starting to come together. Look at how refined these edges are already starting to look. And once you've got the sculpture to a point that you feel like the cleanup work is done, and you have all the surfaces to the point that you want them to, refined and ready to be finished, I always like to just take a little bit of time and live with my sculptures. Put it somewhere, like, put it in your house, or in this case, I put it in the woods, and I just walked around and stared at it for a while. And it's kind of a meditative process. Just spend some time with it. In this case, I just, I decided to just refer back to the original sketch, which is a great thing to do if you really are indecisive. So, the path forward, we're going to go ahead and super polish a couple of these surfaces. I'm not sure, maybe 1, 2, or 3. I'm thinking 3 for the finished piece, and then we're going to let the rest of the sculpture just rust naturally, and we'll go over both processes here. Real quick, I just wanted to refer you to an earlier work I did, which was kind of the inspiration for this surface technique that I'm going to use going forward, and I think it came out pretty well. There are a variety of ways to take carbon steel and give it sort of a mirror polish, or at least a shiny finish. And I'm always kind of on a budget, so I just wanted to show you what we're going to be using for this project. And this is 5 different grits of silicone carbide grinding wheels that you can pick up at a Harbor Freight or I'm sure any big box store. First off, I'm going to start with the 220 because I felt like I was actually getting a pretty good polish just with the wire wheel. And I didn't feel like I needed to go any lower than 220 on this, so it's already starting to polish, even just with the 220. We're going to move up to the 400 grit. I'm going to run through this pretty fast. I think the main thing is you just want to look at the technique here. You've got to stay moving. You don't want to stay in any one place for too long. Just keep moving. I prefer circular motions. I don't know what technique you might find works best for you, but Yeah, look at that. Beautiful.
So after we give it the old 600, we are pretty much as close as we can probably get to a mirror finish with the tools we have at our disposal. I'm debating whether to hit this with some buffing compound. But really, the whole intention is for it to pick up on things in the background. See how the light changes? That's what we want. This is going to get a clear coating anyway, so some of that polishness is going to go away. And this is the next section that's going to get polished. So this is just wire brushed mirror polish.
Wow, folks, this really came together nicely. I'm very impressed with how it's picking up on the colors in the background. And in this beautiful fall light, man, it really looks nice. And that's going to do it for the polishing. So, in order to preserve this, we're going to have to clear coat all the polished areas.
And I'll just show you real quick what that looks like. Nothing too complicated. We just masked all the unpolished edges. We're going to spray the bottom too so we don't get it rusting too quickly over time. And we're just using standard household masking tape like you'd use in any painting project or craft project. And here again, we've spent the greater part of last evening just masking all of this. Then what we're going to need to do is just with any paper you have lying around, we're going to adhere that paper either to the tape or just to underneath the tape. Butcher paper, construction paper, any paper will work, just so that it can catch any of the clear coat as it falls down onto the piece. And once I get that all set up, I'll meet you over there.
And there you go. Like a nice little perfectly wrapped package. You could even use newspaper for this. It would work just as well. Just make sure and get those lines super clean, because everywhere that's not masked is going to be clear coated. Next up, the spray paint. I'm just using this Rust-Oleum high gloss lacquer, and I also want to show you it's smart to wear PPE in any time you're doing any kind of spray paint. Again, I should probably be wearing a respirator, but it was a nice windy day. So, like I said, we're going to coat the bottom. And then just showing you my technique here, just back and forth, about a foot away from the piece. Just follow the instructions on the can, but I find just a quick back and forth, that seems to work for me. Be sure to shake it up in between sprays, and just clear coat at will. I sped this up quite a bit. You don't want to put it on too thick, and you really don't want to get drips. If you get drips, you might as well just start over. Grind it off and go again. Here's round 2. However, I think this stuff dried in like half an hour, and then you could do a second coat.
And reveal just really nice clean lines. Sometimes I'll just stick each strip of tape and just stick it to my shirt, and a little bit of lint helps it just peel off. After the clear coat, it's still pretty mirror finish. It's not bad. And then on to our next step.
There are a lot of different ways to rust metal, but I prefer these two, hydrogen peroxide and my own ebony stain. I always suggest you do a test tile first, which is what you're seeing here. For the ebony wood stain, follow these instructions. There's lots of recipes out there. If If you want, go ahead and just pause this and read through everything. And here's the result. After putting on probably 3 coats in a 12-hour period. Hydrogen peroxide on the left, the ebony stain on the right. Both have rich colors. Well, here we go, and it's time to commit. And first off, we're going to apply the hydrogen peroxide, just pure straight hydrogen peroxide that you can get at any grocery store or drugstore. I'm going to speed this up for you, but yeah, I'm using a nice fine brush and just a little cup full of the peroxide, and you want to hit all the areas first because it's going to start the etching process right away, and it's going to eat into that metal pretty quickly. So once you feel like you've coated all your areas, now it's for the ebony stain. I decided to go a little more aggressive on this right side here and just kind of gentle with the other side and just let gravity do the work for you. You can also use a sprayer.
It's only been about 30 minutes, but you can just see these deep, rich tones starting to come out. And it's just etching the metal, eating away at the surface. Sort of taking the place of time in a matter of hours. This area's looking particularly nice right here. Gravity's going to want to keep pulling that down. So I think I'll just keep adding water. This side, I let just the peroxide and the ebony mix. And I'm just going to keep hitting it with water. Because it is looking so good. If the camera would focus. Look at that. Almost looks like a brown trout. Gorgeous. After about only an hour, a little more, you can see how deep that rust already starts to attach itself. And our clear coat is creating a beautiful dividing line. This is exactly the look I was going for, and I may just continue to hit it with just plain water, just tap water at this point. I wasn't as aggressive with the ebony stain on this side, but you can see that it still just has a very dramatic effect. At this point, I'm just adding water. Just a light mist every now and then to keep the rust activated.
And there it is, the finished sculpture. I did end up making a pedestal for it, but I feel like that's a video for a whole nother series. How do you know when it's done? I guess when you can walk away from it and be proud and you don't have that lingering feeling in your mind that something was left undone or unfinished. And in this case, I think it all just came together beautifully. All the lines are crisp and clean, and now the sculpture's just out there in the world, ready to live its life, beyond its creator. And I think it came out just fine.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for the 3-part series on A Beginner's Guide to Making Sculpture. I hope you found it useful or at least somewhat inspiring. I hope that it could lead you to try something different, maybe a new material, collaborate with somebody, or hopefully it'll help you solidify some ideas you've already been working on and maybe haven't been able to figure it out. Anyway, I enjoyed making it, and I really thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below. Please keep it family friendly. And come on back to Light a Fire Studio anytime. I'll be here. Hope to make some new videos for you in the new year, and I'm looking forward to it. So do what I do, put on your best hoodie, and go make something.